Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Here it's morning time. We're having our morning mate this morning. I want to talk today a little bit about inflation. Where's inflation going right now? What do we see hope in inflation turning back the other direction? Fed's been raising interest rates now, 50 basis points, which is a half a percentage point this last rise. So let's talk a little bit about that this morning and what that means to us and how that's going to affect us going forward economically. DeFi, IoT, let's get into this. All right, well, we know that like early last year, I guess we can go back all the way to the end of 2021, the Federal Reserve of the United States of America was talking about raising interest rates. Now, I want to keep this simple and yet short. So I want to just kind of go over this a little bit. I'm going to read a few things to you here as well from the Coin Bureau desk, which is a group that really does a lot of research. They have a team. Really enjoy them as a source of information. So rising interest rates, I'm going to read through here what the purpose of that is and what the Fed wants to do right now. Now, this is in collaboration with other central banks of other countries, the World Bank, as well as in collaboration what was a group known as the World Economic Forum. So there's a purpose and an agenda behind the interest rate rise. Now, there's a purpose that was established in the United States many years ago when the Federal Reserve was established, of keeping a balance of only at 2% inflation. They're talking now pushing that to a higher level, 3 or 4, even 5%, and just us living with higher costs of living going forward. And there's issues that they're outside of the control of the Federal Reserve and this banking system. And what causes inflation is our fiat currencies, right? The dollar, for example. And then you can say, well, we have digital currencies. Well, okay, digital currencies won't necessarily cause the inflation, but it's going to be something that's going to actually be a control that the federal government, the Federal Reserve, will have over us. Not the banking system. The banking system will be pushed out. And this is why right now, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, I think Citi isn't involved with this. Don't quote me on that, but there's these three banks and maybe one or two more that are actually trying to develop their own blockchain cryptocurrency that they have recently done a report to introduce to our federal government. They're trying to actually be the ones that will control that digital currency. So it's not a crypto in the way of decentralized. It's a digitized, centralized currency that will be run and manipulated by the central banks of each country. Now then you have the World Bank that would have desire their own currency on a global scale, which would be given then more to what we would call that they call themselves the elites, be given to one class of people, another currency given to another class of people, which is similar to what I saw when I was in Cuba. That the Cuban people had one currency, and the elites or even the tourists when they came in had a different type of currency that they operated on. So that's what happens under tyrannical type of governments. Now, going back, I want to read this, that there's two scenarios and same outcomes, right? So let's go through these two scenarios of the Federal Reserve, their interest rate rise. Now, they've declared now they're not going to rise 3/4 of the basis points, or with 75 basis points, 3/4 percentage point anymore. They're going to lower that down to just 0.5% each time, but they're going to raise it over a longer period of time. So we can plan on living with higher interest rates and a higher cost of living going forward. That is pretty much a done deal. Now let's read this, and I just want to go into this from what Guy in Coin Bureau has written, and I think it gives good understanding. He said, I'm going to quote him here, "I've been thinking a lot about the current macro environment, and I've realized it's the large scale, right? Micro is small scale, macro is large scale. I've realized there are two possible scenarios, both with the same outcome." Okay, so let's recap. Central banks have been aggressively raising interest rates to fight inflation. Now, all central banks are going to raise interest rates because everything's based off the dollar right now, the dollar being the petrodollar. We're going to get into another video about that petrodollar and how much buoyancy and how much life our dollar still has as a petrodollar and therefore being a world currency. There is risk there too. That's another video we'll do probably in a couple of days. Going on here. The inflation is coming from a combination of factors. I reckon the two biggest contributors are the increase in money supply as a result of pandemic stimulus, which is true. There are a lot of printing going on irresponsibly. That causes inflation. That causes inflation in Argentina, Ecuador, that collapsed in 98. Mexico, we've seen that happen before, etc. This is nothing new. Brazil, it happened when I was there. Nothing new. It was the Cruzeiro when I was there. Now it's the Real. Well, so two biggest contributors are the increase of printing money due from pandemic stimulus, quote unquote. The energy shortages due to underinvestment and the Ukraine war. Now, the Ukraine war is where we like to put a lot of blame, but that has cut off a lot of energy crisis because of what the United States and the NATO nations, those that all group together and defend each other. That's that little block of, like, we're a little gang of, hey, we're going to defend apparently the free world, right? But they're actually, those sanctions have caused us to have energy shortages. Also due to other factors, but that's a main factor there. Obviously, the only factor the central banks can really affect is the money supply. They cannot do anything about supply and demand. China, with their zero tolerance policy of COVID, is saying, hey, we can't ship because we can't work because we're shut down. And there is a lot of suspicion that that's not even, there's suspicion there. Okay, we'll go into that another time. So central banks can only control the money supply, and they do this by increasing interest rates. Increasing interest rates makes it harder to borrow, makes existing debt more expensive, and also incentivizes savings. This causes the price of goods and services to fall, at least in theory, right? Right now, it is expected that the central banks will continue to raise interest rates to destroy demand in this manner until this causes a recession. And this is what their agenda is and purpose is. This is not anything hidden. The World Economic Forum in Davos, they're meeting again this month. That'll come out even more like it did last year. They're not hiding this, and what their intention is to throw us into a recession. It's believed that a recession would be sufficiently deflationary to bring down interest rates back to that 2% target that many central banks have set as part of their mandates. And that's just some arbitrary number they've come up with that they need to be able to have to control the economies. And there's a balance of wage is going up versus prices going up, and they try to maintain that balance. Okay, there's a law in there they try to maintain, and this apparently a 2% margin is something that they've decided years ago that this would be their area. But that's not concrete. There's no exact science there, right? That just worked for a while, and it really didn't really work. This is what's caused our other recessions that we've had, even going into, if you will, even 2008, etc. As I mentioned a few moments ago, this is the only demand side of the equation. Even if central banks manage to bring back inflation down to the demand side, the 2%, the energy inflation on the supply side will remain. And that's a fact. We all need energy, those things we need. And now that you're eliminating fracking, eliminating these petroleum-based gases and so forth, or fuels we use, that's also going to cause us another problem. And that's going to cause more inflation. So that means a very high chance inflation will rise again and will be worse if the recession is deep, because this could force central banks to pivot, to change sides, or to lower interest rates and to start stimulating again, printing money again and giving it away. This would cause even more inflation. So it's a double-edged sword. The central banks would raise interest rates again and inflation would come down again. Assuming no recession, then it would eventually become apparent that there's still an energy shortage that would still maintain the cause of inflation. This would force governments to address the energy shortage. Okay, that's one possible scenario. Let's go into the second one to end this. The second is that the central banks keep raising interest rates until something in the financial system breaks. In plain English, they will keep raising interest rates until the government, a big bank, or big company experience some issue that could potentially destroy the financial system. If this happens, then central banks will be forced to pivot. This pivot means change the direction, change their attitude, change their modus operandi, how they function or how they think, their philosophy. What's the difference? And this will likewise cause inflation to stay high or even increase, just like in the first scenario. Okay. The difference about the second scenario is that central banks will not have the ability to raise interest rates to fight inflation. This means there will be the only option left to fight inflation, that is, address the energy shortage. Assuming this happens, it should result in a massive economic recovery around the world as inflation comes down and central banks finally ease. The same is true with the first scenario. Though this outcome would take longer to play out, the only question is when this energy pivot will occur. Let's hope it comes soon, according to what has been stated here by Guy in. So I want to give you my feelings on this. Bitcoin was created, the whole Satoshi group, person, individual. The idea was foreseeing this and foreseeing the digital dollar that's apparently going to begin to be rolled out this year, 2023, through payment platforms with the Fed, through our government, the United States, as well as in other countries. That's another topic we'll talk about. Energy crisis needs to remain a crisis, so that if we're in crisis, then our constitutional rights are suspended. That's why we keep seeing the whole issue of this illness that's passing around, going around the world, is continued to be in a crisis, when there's been other crises and other illnesses that have been worse, and we can go into that's another topic too. But we need to maintain us in crisis state. That's what I'm trying to get at, okay? And our governments maintain that crisis state to suspend our constitutional rights. While they're doing this, they will be rolling out the digital dollar. They will be rolling out carbon credit scores, personal carbon credit scores, not just business or corporate, but personal carbon credit scores. And they will be rolling out other measures that we'll get into that are on this 2030 agenda by the United Nations and now in alliance with the World Economic Forum. What do I see is going to happen with inflation? Well, the gold and silver is being bought up by these world banks. And there's a reason they're buying it up. And the reason that gold and silver is maintaining itself at a lower price, even though it's pushing itself, because it's naturally just pushing that barrier, that ceiling, that is all being manipulated by central banks and primarily our U.S. central bank. Reason being, they and other central banks are trying to buy this up at a lower price. Where would I be right now? Would I be hoarding dollars in a safe? No, obviously you have to have some there. I definitely don't want it in the bank account, or bank accounts with Wells Fargo in the U.S. and as well as banks in Ecuador. We don't hold money in the bank accounts. That's not a safe place for it. You hold your money in a safe, okay, well you can put it in a safe, but have a good safe and a good safe place to hide that safe, because then you got to worry about personal theft, right? And as crime increases, you're going to see that happen as well. So you need to hold some cash in a very secure area, secure place. There, you do need that for now, but that's in rotation. Inflation fighters, well, gold and silver are traditional. We'll get in another video on silver, as well as Bitcoin. Bitcoin right now looks to be outside of the touch of our U.S. government and other governments. Now, they may try to do things to shut down the mining of that, like Canada's doing right now. And they believe it's in British Columbia. They've actually suspended the ability to mine, kind of like New York did prior. So you could see that attack. But then again, you're going to have enough people out there. I strongly believe that our community is strong enough that people will stand up to defend that free market economy. And with the digital currency coming and in continued inflation and high prices, there's going to have to be a new system, and that's what takes place. Normally, every so often, right? There's a period of years you can get in disputing, whether it's 90 years or whatever. The global currency changes position. It changes who it is and what it is. And we're in that time frame right now. So just prepare ourselves for that. There is hope out there by buying like these gold backs we talked about. I don't make any money off of this. I'm just referring it to you what we're doing. Just got 30 more of them. And I just kind of pick up a few hundred here, a few hundred there. And yeah, they're above a little bit what you would pay for if you're buying an ounce of gold bullion, but you got to consider it's broken down, put in paper, and it's easy then for exchange. What am I going to do with an ounce of bullion with gold or silver? Not though you should have this, and you should be putting this away and storing in a very secure place, and generally not at your residence, or if it's at your residence, a very secure area. As well as with your crypto keys. I just saw something where somebody got arrested and they had their keys in their wallet, and the police had their camera on and they were showing the crypto keys and asking what this was. I was like, oh, that's crypto stuff. He had his keys in his wallet. That's ridiculous. Hide that. Put that down on metal. Like, I'm going to make sure that our account has all that stuff down on metal with all of our wallets. Don't put your money, leave them on a platform. Leave that lesson learned from what's had with FTX. Keep your money in your cold wallet. And be wise where you invest. Understand that when you invest in these things, look at them as a stock. Okay, that's really what you're getting into with crypto. Bitcoin's a whole nother animal. And we'll get into that too. Bitcoin and crypto are two different animals. We support decentralization and Bitcoin. We support decentralized crypto. There are some good cryptos that are centralized that you may want to invest in, but understand they're centralized. Okay, that's the only difference. So we've had videos on what's decentralized and centralized. We'll get back around to that. DeFi, IoT. There's hope going forward. Just be knowledgeable what you're gonna do. Know going forward that we're probably going to be living with inflation, higher prices for our lifetimes. This can probably take a long time to come back around. They don't want the crisis to go away, and that's the problem. There's been other evidences that show that we could. The war in Ukraine, for example. Russia's offered peace accords, but it's not being listened to because that's against what they need to do to reset this economic system we have, which is to introduce the digital currencies, the digital dollar and other digital currencies by the central banks and the World Bank. And that's going forward. That's a reality. We need to deal with that. So we'll talk more about that in another video, DeFi, IoT. I hope you found this informative. And, this is our Amazon homemade, what they call mate down in Argentina and Chile and some of these South American countries. We make this, some will call it tea up here in North America, but we call it a mate tea. We find these herbs from the Amazon jungle, and I think we might start doing something on that, on different type of mates and natural teas that you can buy even now that are actually nutritional and good for you and give you the same kind of stimulus that what coffee would give you, but it actually in a natural way without getting the side effects of coffee and caffeine. DeFi, IoT, we hope you have a great and lovely day today. Go forward with hope. There is hope, and we'll defend it.